Hello everybody and welcome to another Hobby Cheating Q&A live. Well, what is this? Why, this is when we sit down once a month and we do our best to answer all of your hobby related questions live. We'll get right into it as soon as I see that it's going. There we go. Okay, so looks like everything's going normally now. So give me a little thumbs up in the chat that you can hear me okay, that kind of stuff. Hopefully that everything's working normal. So give me a shout. Somebody post something over here that says, you can hear me. And but what do we do here? Well, for the next hour or so, I'm going to sit here and do my best to answer all of your hobby related questions. So if you've got a question, there's a chat box on one of these sides. I never know which one it's on, but feel free to drop it in there, and we'll do our best and crack on to get an answer out there. Fantastic. Looks like we're all good. Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it happens to be, wherever you are in the world. I wanted to make sure I got this done this week, as obviously last week we had our interview with Richard Gray, which was a lot of fun. I hope everybody enjoyed that last week. We've got some more fun ones coming up. And next week I will be in Australia for CanCon. So, there you go. Emily says, hey there. Hey, Emily, how you doing? I hope you're not having to travel too much for work. She says she's been working on her army in 24 hours. She said she's at 25 and a quarter and still have to do the metal and the bases. That's still pretty great. Look, it's not about the exact number. It's about setting that thing as a goal for yourself, right? And getting there to where you can. So the fact that you've set yourself into that mode and are focused on getting things done tells me you're in a great place. So if anybody's got any questions, go ahead and drop them in. I myself am just finishing up one project for my Whirlwind's Edge army. I've got all my little biker pistoliers that are all finished up, and they're going to go on their bases today. I'm just finishing up their bases, and then these little motorcycle dudes are going to be ready to run and gun. So I'm working on that. I've got my next project prepped up, which will be the Lady of Strife from Creature Caster. That'll be a lot of fun to get into some stuff. And while working on that, I was also editing some videos today for some upcoming hobby cheating. I hope everybody enjoyed the black armor one today. I know that's been highly requested for a long time, so I really tried to get into the details there. So hopefully people enjoyed that. If you haven't checked it out yet, check that out. All right, so let's take a look at some of the questions that are rolling in. John Shave says, hi Vince, I'm planning on doing Tempestus Scions with white armor over black clothes. Okay, got it. My question is this: spray black and paint white over, or spray white and fill in the black? Neither. Zenithal, and then go from there in the way you saw me do the black armor earlier, and the way you've seen me do painting smooth white. Just starting from a neutral tone. Like if you don't have the ability to Zenithal in any way, like you don't own 2 Rattle cans, then my advice would be gray. Like it'll be way easier to work from a neutral color into each of those than onto any one, than starting on either extreme. So there you go. Okay, Brandon S. Hey Vince, for an army similar to how you painted your ogres, how would you paint the monster trucks? I wanted to do white, but I think it's going to look blah on winter bases. Yeah, I mean, in general, like black and white, no offense to the previous question asker, because I understand a lot of colors in 40K, unfortunately, are black and white, but so this is independent of that. Black and white are the most boring colors. It's not like a subjective judgment. I just mean they contain the least amount of visual information that are communicated. Human beings tend to find color, things that are hues, that is to say, actually be more visually interesting, but they need contrast. They need expressions of shade and tint to be interesting. Now, that being said, yeah, you can still do them as white-ish. and have it look fine? The answer is you work in colors, like hues. Working in hues is always the answer. So make the skin a kind of warm, orangey, reddy, browny purple, anything in that range, and then make the fur bluey white, right? So color is still there and dominating, but you then against the snow, it'll be a lot more interesting. It'll stand out because it's a thing that is actually colorful and has a bunch of different hues in it compared to the snow, which tends to be just kind of, white. Okay. So that would be my best advice. Do the same thing there. Just work in those subtle hues. Devin Jones, when I restarted painting, I started with Reaper. I noticed that you don't have any Reapers in your go-tos. I have no religion on this. Is there any way I'm doing myself a disservice with that as the backbone of my paint collection? No. They just don't tend to like them. They have a finish that I don't particularly love. They tend to go powdery, especially in the lighter colors, a little more than I like. And they're just not as suited to my personal style, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. I mean, Kirill Kanayev, arguably, one of the best painters in the world, if not the best. I mean, he's certainly in the top, tippy top echelon of like 5 or 6 people I would name as the best painter in the world. And, he uses Reaper all the time, like all the time. So if it's good enough for him, there you go. That's all I can say. Am I overlapping with a Tabletop Minion stream? I didn't know that. I thought he was doing his show tomorrow. Did he decide to do it today? The once a month Patreon stream. Okay, gotcha. I didn't know that. Well, I apologize for that. But hey, hi Adam. I hope you're doing well. He's a great dude. Okay. Josh says, can you talk about scale 75 Inktense wood and your process on small wood things like Skaven shields? Buddy, I'm always happy to talk about Inktense wood. The intense wood. So what we're talking about here is this right here. For those who are unfamiliar, so this is scale 75. It's part of their Inktense set. This is the first one. There are now 2 Inktense sets. This one is Inktense wood, which is great. How do I apply it over small areas like shields? Sure. So assume we're starting from a standard zenithal. I dry brush the shield area or the wood area in white. If there's no texture at all, I will draw in the lines with ivory. And then I lay a layer of Inktense wood over top and then add other colors to taste. So maybe I'll do another little part of Agrax in there. Maybe I'll work some green in there through some subtle washes or something like that. Maybe we'll stipple some chips or cuts in there. Whatever, something like that. And then I just matte out the whole thing because these Inktense inks are very, very glossy as inks. So you just want to apply like an AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish and, job's a good one. If we're talking about like a Skaven shield, so theoretically something you're painting, 100 or more of, that would be super good for me. And it'll feel like wood and look great because it's magic wood in a bottle. Okay. Sorry, I have to scroll back here. There you go. Okay, Dorn Jr., can you direct me to where you talked about dealing with wet palette paper curling on my Redgrass Gaming XL? I can't find it, but I swear you instructed us. That's a good question. I don't have it curl, but I can tell you how I solve that. I don't know if I ever mentioned it, but I'll talk about how I do it. Which is, I wet the sponge and everything, get everything nice and wet. And then I lay down the paper. Here. We'll do this. I don't have my other camera today because it wouldn't work before the show, and I don't know why. I need to, reboot it. But okay. So I'm sorry, everybody, that I can't just actually switch to my palette cam and do that. In the future, I'll have these. But I take the paper and I lay it down like this, side to side. And then I just literally take my gloved hand and I run it across in both directions, smoothing toward the edge. It'll want to curl. You just push it back down. The key is to have your wet palette be very wet when you start. Like the water will evaporate, of course. And then, yeah, I just push from the center out. Think of like you're making pizza dough. Right? Just nice and smooth out, soft, gentle push. And that's generally all you have to do. It'll lay flat once you get that, It's curling because it's suddenly getting wet. Once you flatten it and it sort of evens out, it'll stop curling. Steve Keed. Question. Painting a unified Chaos Army with black armor as the base. Yay, today's video. For my Nurgle, I want to corrode and rust up the black. Any tips on incorporating that with black? Sure. I mean, standard brown and orange rust will look okay against it. Black never shows wear very easily. I mean, that's why, you know, like that's why you kind of, you don't have the full range of options there because you can't do deeper stuff, but you can still do brown rust and streaks and orange and stuff like that. So yeah, just focus on more of like the brighter brown and orange tones in your rust and you should be just fine. That would be my advice. So you can still, you know, focus on edging, like where you've got edges that are going to rust, make sure that's nice and poppy with some bright orange, and it'll show up well against that black. You know, that's a color combination that's quite striking. So there you go. Alejandro, Vince, have you had a chance to try the Liquitex acrylic inks white specifically? It's easier to find in my area than your usual recommendations of FW. Yeah. Nope, that's Vallejo. Yeah, I've tried a couple of the different ones. They're fine. There's nothing wrong with the Liquitex. As long as it's the artist inks, you're fine. The ones that have the standard, like, durability and light fastness and resistance to water. Yeah, no issue. If you can only find the Liquitex, you'll be perfectly fine. Those are a perfectly good substitution. Keys. Hi, Vince. When following any kind of color scheme on the color wheel, complementary, split complementary, etc., does the saturation of the colors used matter for achieving color balance? Oh my gosh, yes. 1000% yes. In general, if you make both colors highly saturated, or you know, you make all your colors highly saturated, the piece will become overwhelming. There are ways to do that, but it's tricky, and you've got to really watch yourself. I would so if you go and watch that Richard Gray interview, where we talked about the way he used red and blue together, which aren't traditional complementary colors, but he used red, blue, and a little pop color of green. He controlled it in two different ways. One was desaturating the red through extreme orange highlights, so pushing it more into orange, but having it be very, you know, very orangey. When he did the blue part, it's highly desaturated blue because he added tons of white, which just desaturated the heck out of the blue color. So he had a strong red-orange as his primary. Then he had a very weak blue. And then green, instead of weakening the color, he just reduced the amount of it. So there's only a few instances of it around there, of that bright green color. So there's kind of a couple tricks you can use. One is you can use less of it. So if you've only got a few dots of the complementary color or something like that, you can actually be rather intense with it. If it's, say, gems or something, cool. There's a few scattered around the thing. Neat. It's neat to have them pop strong. If it's going to be something big where you have, you know, a character, a figure who's in like a bunch of armor that's showing, but also has a big cloak and cloth and a tabard and stuff that's all showing, and you want those to be complementary-ish, then one of those needs to be highly desaturated. Okay. Otherwise, it's just going to be too overpowering to the eye. And of course, you can desaturate by adding in some of the complementary color, which will also unify the piece, or you can just use the old standby of, you know, gray, brown, white, black, all those things that sap the life out of color. Merchant Prince. Any tips on doing green armor that's so dark it appears near black from a distance? I paint a really dark green, I guess. I you know, like, it's a flippant answer. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's actually like one of the greens in GW's line is like that. I don't remember what it is. It was like a super dark black green. And like my advice would be do mostly that. Do mostly a color like that. And then in the high volumes, the highlights have very small volume highlights. So most of your piece is like, again, if 1 is the highest highlight and 5 is the deepest shadow, have most of the piece be 4 and 5. And have a very small, short transition into 1, 2, 3, where it goes up to something fairly high highlighted into like a normal-ish green tone. And then when you get close and look at it, the eye will read the highlights and see the green, but from a distance, it will, you know, if 80% of the surface area is that dark black green, it'll read more as that. So that's probably my best advice. As far as color-wise, there's a lot of good choices out there. Like I said, there's the GW color. Game ink from Vallejo also makes a really nice black-green ink. So that's something you could use to help smooth your transition. Okay. Emily says the Patreon stream starts in about an hour, so it shouldn't overlap too much. Depends on how wordy Vince is. Well, we're screwed. Yeah, that's generally my problem. Al Capone. Hey, Vince, given that you like to work with underpainting, when do you typically choose to work with opaque paint such as Pro Acryl? All the time. I mean, underpainting still has value even if you're using fairly opaque paints. All paint is somewhat translucent. Painting even Pro Acryl paints over white is going to look very different than over black. Even if to your eye it looks completely opaque. Like, as an experiment, just, take a piece of plastic card, prime it black, prime it white, run a layer of opaque, paint over it, and you're going to see that certain colors, especially reds and all those kinds of things, anything warm, is going to be highly affected by what's underneath it. So, I mean, the answer is always if I like the tones. I tend to like Pro Acryl because they thin really well, they cover really well, they're a nice paint. I mean, right now, my paint that's over here, kind of being used on this current project was a mix of a bunch of scale, Pro Acryl, watercolors, and a few Vallejo. So, I mean, it's, I'm all over the shop. It's a question of, like, right fit for right thing. Do I like the tone? That kind of thing. In the end, it doesn't, I'm always covering all of my underpainting. Like, there's always 20 layers of paint on anything I'm painting, right? It's just most of that stuff is very, very thin and glazes and things. So, in the end, you don't see any of the underpainting, but it still helps set the overall tone. And it just gives you a good sketch to work from. It just makes it easier on your eyes, too. Like, painting an all-black figure is really hard on your eyes if you're not reflecting much light. It doesn't, like, seeing the separation between the elements. I'm an old man here, so it just kind of makes my life easier. Scott Baker, I liked your black armor tutorial. Thinking of using metal color for my Chaos Warriors. Maybe gunmetal as the darkest tone, then lighter shades for highlights and accent. Any tips on using these? Sure, you could look at something like my speed painting steel video. I think it's like 105 or something. Hobby Cheating 105, somewhere in that range. You could do the whole warrior like that and then paint matte paints over the fur and cloaks and stuff. But yeah, I would actually recommend if you're going to use something like gunmetal, it's still not quite dark enough. It's a good tactic. I love the idea. I would do it with that mixed in with a little matte black ink. So something like Vallejo Game Ink Black would be a great fit. I'd mix that in and that would be my layer. And then I would work up from there. Go into base gunmetal, go into gunmetal plus, pale burnt metal, and then just pale burnt metal or something. There's a simple, kind of 4-step progression. That's how I've done. I did an Anvils of Heldenhammer. There you go. Miniature for someone a couple years back, and that's how I did that effectively because I wanted a black metallic scheme. So there you go. Alexander Held, your 24-hour video has changed my view on the hobby so much. I'm redoing my secondhand army. It isn't perfect, but it's being painted. That's awesome. That's great to hear because. I think more people need to lose the fear. Like, a painted miniature is always better than an unpainted miniature. Full stop. Okay? So there's no reason not to just get painting. You will learn more by painting than you will by not painting. I guarantee that. And I think he's got more to the question. So let's see. Trying to paint a blue army, what other colors would go well with it? Lots of things. Depends on what you want. I mean, blue's a pretty versatile color. The traditional complementary is orange, so you can use a desaturated orange as a fun color to complement it. Blue can go great with things like purple and green. Like if you want to go kind of with that side of the color wheel, you can lean all over there, and that can be a fun sort of Zinchi. That's how Zinch colors are arranged, right? It's blue, purple, and like teal, and that works fine. So yeah, there's lots of choices. Just grab yourself any kind of little color wheel if you like and play with different color schemes that you think seem fun with like a triadic or a split complementary. Sessions College, if you just search for Sessions College color wheel, they have a digital color wheel you can use that you can just like set yourself to blue and then try a bunch of different schemes and it'll show you the different colors to use. It's great. It's a good resource. Okay. Andre, what Citadel or Vallejo colors do you recommend for general all-purpose use in zenithal highlighting as far as rattle cans go? Would you do 2, 3, maybe even 4 colors? If I was going to do rattle cans, I always keep it to 2. It's just black and white. You don't need anything else. Now, if you're going to do something unusual, sure, any of them can work. Then it's just some dark and some light. Like, it's always 2 colors. Let's say you're painting like a bunch of gross Nurgle stuff. Let's take plague bearers. Okay. I would do a dark green. I don't know what their dark greens are. I don't know the rattle can paints that well, but whatever their dark green is. And then ivory, or whatever their bone color is. I assume they probably have some kind of Ushabti bone or something. That would be my zenith all over a bunch of plague bearers, because that just did most of your work for you. Like from there, boom, it's Glaze City, and you're rock and roll, right? So, but when I'm doing an airbrush, I can get crazier because I can be more precise. A rattle can isn't precise enough to do that many different colors. Stick to 2. Rattle cans are already very thick paint. You're already risking detail whenever you use a rattle can. So a nice light, quick application of the dark color, nice light, quick application of the light color. Job's a good and off to the painting desk you go. Let's see. Ryan Michael. Ryan. Ran out of a mixed color on my palette. How to best go about remixing it and verifying it roughly the same color before putting it on your model? I don't know. Just do that. Just put the 2 back together. This is not a thing I think about. I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't work like that. I will often mix tiny amounts of paint. And I mix paint constantly. And I just keep remixing it. Like, you still have it on your wet. If it's on a wet palette, which it should be, it gets a lot easier. 1, it stays useful longer. And 2, like, you still have the other paint there next to it on your wet palette. So you just bring more in and mix it around. Does this look like what's next to it on the palette, right? That's my simplest answer. But just try it on the back of your hand first. And, if it's slightly off, which sometimes it will be, just add in more of whatever you need. It's like, if you put paint on the miniature and it's slightly wrong, who cares? It's irrelevant. Like, that's 8 seconds of additional painting you're going to have to do. Go back, mix in. You made yourself a blue-black. You mixed and you ran out of it. And there's a new blue-black you're doing, and you was too blue. Okay. Cool, you just made a slightly highlight color. Pull it up into the highlights, go back, pull in a little more black, glaze over, bing, bang. Job's a good one, right? Like, I think people get too hung up on mixes in general and, like, having things exactly right. I mean, my palette is just a mess of different colors I've pulled here and there and mixed a couple brushfuls here and mixed a couple brushfuls there. It's no one will ever notice is the short answer. Like, unless you made something wildly different, no one will ever notice. It doesn't matter. Okay. Let's see. Grim. I have been wondering for a while and can't find a clear answer that makes it clear. Sure. What is the difference between Vallejo thinner medium and glaze medium, and does Lamia medium fit in? So what you need to do is go back and watch my paint additives hobby cheating video. I think it's 135, and that will explain all this stuff. But here's the short answer to the specific question. Thinner medium is just medium. It's just acrylic medium, as far as I know. I don't think they use any extra additives in there. It's just acrylic medium. Whenever you see the word thinner across ranges, in general, it's not always true because they never release their recipes for this stuff. So it's hard to tell what other additives they might have snuck in there. But in general, paint consists of 3 things: pigment, medium, solvent. Okay? Pigment is pigment. It's what adds color. Solvent, in the case of acrylic paints, is water. Medium it's your medium. It's acrylic medium. It's what gives it its name. And so, in general, thinner is just more of that. Acrylic medium dries in a lattice work format. And so, hence, when you thin things with solvent too much, you added too much solvent, not enough medium, pigment breaks up. That's why you get coffee staining. Adding additional medium just keeps... The lattice will still form, but the pigment is less dense in it. Lamia medium, as far as I know, is basically their version of that thing. Like, it's their version of just their medium. I mean, I think everything. I think I have everything you just mentioned. Like, one's probably a little, like, GW probably put something else in there, But like there's War Colors thinner next to the thinner medium of Vallejo. You can see they're both like these white milky colors of acrylic medium. Lamia probably has other stuff in it. I don't know what else they probably put in here, but something. Glazed medium is just thinner plus other additives. Generally like flow improver, a little bit of retarder so it dries more slowly and can be pushed in, evened out. So it's just additives. That's the hidden fourth element of paint, is various additives that make paint work in weird ways. So there you go. Berserk, can you use your influence to get Vallejo to put out new metal color golds and coppers? I wish. I wouldn't actually want new golds and coppers. I would just want a pure bronze, like one that doesn't have any other colors in it, because that's actually the hardest one to make. That's the one that you've got to get, like, you got to go in the lab and like a couple drops of this and some brown ink and something. I mean, I still use it all the time. It's fine. I can get a good bronze out of it, but I'd love it if they just had one more straight out of the pot. It's the funniest paint range because it's just the best paint, and they have 72 colors of silver and 1 gold and 1 copper that you have to mix to make all your shades. So, whatever. Anyone have tips for painting white feathers doing goose Zangors, which I love the idea of. Hopefully they're float goats. Float goats is a thing now, folks. If you're doing Zangors on disc in any way, those are now float goats. That's my favorite name ever. I can't take credit for that. Somebody on Twitter said that, and it's my favorite thing ever. Yeah, the answer is work a color into the shadows. Just don't make them white. The same thing I said earlier. Work a hue in. Just like with the fur, I mentioned blue. Blue's a great color. It'll make them look cold. You can use a deep desaturated purple, like black leather is a great one from scale 75. Anything like that, just make them a color, and you can apply it as a wash and pull it toward the shadow. So if this is the shape of the feather, this area should be white, and the center the center line down to the base of the feather should have that color tone in it, with it very faded, culminating to the most rich area of it down here. That's the answer. Galen, hey Vince, question. How do you paint an orcish, worn, and old gold armor with true metallic metal? How to paint an orcish, worn, and old gold armor? For your golden boys. Well, I mean, gold is just gold. Gold doesn't... It depends if you want it to really read as gold or if you're willing to be a little more fantastical with it. If you're trying to keep it to, like, gold, like real gold, it's just gold. You can dust it and dirt it up. Like, it can weather through... other things getting on it, like, that is to say, it can accumulate dirt and grime and stuff like that, and so you could go that direction. But gold is gold. Like, you can set a gold ring on the ground, and if it stays there for 100 years, come back and dust it off, and it will still be gold. That's why gold is cool. It doesn't oxidize in any way or change or rust like in the way that these other metals do. It doesn't react chemically in that way. Now, if you want to be a little more fantastical, then just go nuts. Go nuts with all your normal weathering tricks. Oxidize it, build that kind of stuff in, and who cares? It's fantasy gold. It's not real gold. It's goldinium. And goldinium in this world reacts with oxidation because that's fun. That would be my advice. But, like, the answer is you can make it look older and more worn if you deepen the shadows. So when you're glazing in your inks and stuff for your shading on your true metallic metal, more deeper browns and purples will make it look older. So that's a short answer. Zach, need help with doing 40k orc zombies, looking for zenithal color recommendations for undead orcs. Been using purples and blues from below, but unsure of where to go. Thanks a bunch. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that would work fine. Like, honestly, I don't know exactly the color scheme you want, but I assume they're like gray-green, probably, with like purple in the shadows. So I would do it as a standard. Green works well with a standard zenithal. Purple works well with a standard zenithal. I would just do it as a standard zenithal and then shoot from below with purple, and there you go. Done. You're rock and roll. You're ready to go. Lay a couple thin layers of like a desaturated green over that. Work some gray back into the highlights. Dead orcs. Okay. Let's see. All right. I got to catch back up here. I got to start answering questions quicker. Okay. All right, Matt Eastman. I don't game. I just like to paint minis and busts. My question is there any way to glaze white without it going chalky and making the colors under it pastel? I mainly use Vallejo. Yeah, so don't glaze white. That's number one. Like, there's generally not a reason to glaze white. Don't do it. Apply white normally and then glaze the darker color back down. Okay? So you want this, my hand here, to go from white to purple. Don't glaze the white, paint white here, and then glaze the purple down here. Okay? That's the answer. Now, secondary question. How do you avoid chalkiness in white paint? Use white ink. Use a heavy body acrylic white. They're just richer. So when I say heavy body acrylic white, I mean something like this. You can get this is like my golden artist acrylic for heavy body. This is what I normally use. You can also use like Schminky or whatever it's called. I don't know. It's a European thing or something like that. There's other ones out there. Doesn't matter. It just has to be heavy body artist acrylic paint. Those you can smooth out much better. You can take a big dollop of that HBA white, put it somewhere, and then just pull it down and effectively smooth it out. So you're still not glazing it, but you're feathering it. That'll work better. Additional trick. Gloss medium. In general, or gloss varnish. In general, you don't want to make your paint glossy. There is one exception. The reason you don't want things to be glossy is because then it reflects light in weird ways, and you need to take control of the light with your paint. It shouldn't be your paint reflecting light in strange ways. That's why gloss is just generally bad. Almost nothing should ever be gloss. It just will look bad. Because why is that skirt that is matte? Like this thing, my apron, there's no part of this that's glossy. If this is glossy on the figure and like all of a sudden because I turned it one way, this fold starts reflecting white, pure white light, immediately somebody's going to be like, nope, that's fake. That isn't real. That doesn't work. That doesn't, your brain goes, ah. There's one exception though. Things that are pure white, gloss reflects white, white paint is white. By adding in some gloss varnish or medium, you'll actually create a super smooth white because the eye can't tell the difference between what's white paint and what's reflected light. It's a cool way to smooth it out. So there you go. Hope that helps. When is the wood not intense? Never. It's always intense. Ryan Michael, for photo backgrounds, you recommend in your videos, you recommend Hanger 18, but it seems to no longer have a store. Do you have any other recommendations? I don't know where else to get them from. That was the only place that I got mine from. But I mean, here's a fun thing. You can just take like the book, like I don't think I have a gaming book around me. But the interior page of your game, of most of your game books, like your codices and battle tomes and stuff, has a black and white image. You can always just set that back there open. It doesn't have the infinite horizon trick, but it has this wonderful mix of like random chaos in general black and white gradients that'll work perfect as a background. So you can do that. That's a fun way to go. Other than that, I'm sure there's probably places to get it, but I'd have to look around. I really don't know anymore. You could also just like take a big piece of card paper, like from the hobby store, and just go nuts with your airbrush. And that would work too. If you want to go the cheap way, or even with some rattle cans, just go like Jackson Pollock on it, and you're good to go. Okay. Scott Coley. Scott, do you have any tips regarding weathering pigments and how to properly apply them? Do you varnish the model first? Do you apply them wet or dry? And what, if any, fixing liquids do you use? So, yes, I have a whole hobby cheating on pigments. I have multiple hobby cheatings on using pigments. So I would recommend you go look at that to get the in detail answer. But let me answer your questions in short order here. A dry brush, never wet, always just dry. I keep a palette that is just dry pigment. I mean, pigment can't dry out. So I just literally keep a palette pigment. You can see it right here. That's just a bunch of different pigments. I've got greens and blues and blacks and reds and browns and stuff. I keep it over here. It's well out of the way. Like it's not any way where I can ever bump it or move it. I keep it in a drawer over here. So that way it's not, it can't get disrupted. Dry brush, I use an old, broken, crappy brush, which I don't know where it is at this moment, but it's somewhere around here. Whatever. You want a nice, fat, worn-down brush is the answer. I don't know where my pigment brush is. And I just kind of stipple it in, like just in there. Do I fix it? No, not generally, because it will actually just generally stick. If I need to fix it, a drop of alcohol will work, a drop of varnish will work. In general, you want to avoid varnishing through your airbrush or anything, but you can just literally, or the fixers that are out there, like the pigment fixer from MIG, I think, has one that's really good. Vallejo has one that's really good. You can use all those, but you just like take a drop of it onto a wet brush and you just literally go and put little drops around the area. The only time I really fix pigment is if I'm doing a lot of groundwork with pigment, because there it will wear off and stuff. On things like these bikers tires have pigment that I worked into them. I'm not going to fix those. They're fine. Like, that's not going anywhere. So, will it maybe come off in 20 years? I don't, maybe, but it's fine. But if you wanted to fix it, yeah, just like I use a lot of pigment on all my bases where I just stipple it around for colors in stone. There I just put normal washes over it or dry brushes over it, just more paint over the top because I'm just using it as a step in the painting process. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Devin says he's had some trouble with Liquitex inks where they sometimes get a little grainy. Yeah, I mean, their white is fine. I've used a couple of them and had perfectly fine results. I think that can happen. You should always be using thinner with your inks. Always. Nothing should go through your airbrush without thinner. Full stop. Okay? So even with inks, I use thinner and flow improver. My standard 80-20 thinner flow improver mix. Now, that being said, I've come to trust FW. I just think they're better overall. I've had better results with them, but I've used some Liquitex and I didn't have any bad results, but your mileage may vary as always. Any tips, any hints for using the Badger candy coats? I want to paint my tower blue and then they give the best color. It's a larger area and I'm not sure if I should paint brick by brick or try an airbrush. I would definitely airbrush it. They work best through the airbrush. They're actually somewhat challenging through a brush, but they're great through an airbrush. And then I would varnish afterward. Any kind of varnish will do. Just make sure you put a layer of varnish down because they are pretty susceptible to reactivation, and you want to be careful of that. So just give a nice varnish after you're done, and you're all set. That would be my advice. Daniel Writings, hi Vince, question: how would you approach the ground texture for cave bases? Any tips for making stalagmites? Yeah, I think you asked this question on a video, and I haven't got a chance to answer it yet. I actually have a dungeon video coming out at some point in the future. It's still a ways off. But I've recorded it. I've just got to edit everything together and whatnot. But the short answer to your question is the same as anything. Think about the environment in detail. Don't just casually let your brain wander. Really think about it. So let's do that. Okay, I'll close my eyes. I'm going to conjure the scene. I'm in a cave. In this cave, it's a magical cave full of goblins. What's around me? Well, certainly stalagmites and stalactites. Okay, well, we can't use tights because we don't have a ceiling on our miniatures. Okay, stalagmites, fair. Well, there's mushrooms. It's a goblin cave. There's certainly mushrooms. There's going to be big cracks in the floor, so I'd want to break up the texture. There's going to be rocks and grit scattered about where rock slides have come down the side of the cave or detritus that was left from whatever burrowed this. There's going to be moss and small vegetation, things like that grow in here because these caves will be wet, right? And so they're going to attract small lichen and life like that. That's where, if there's mushrooms, that other kind of life is going to be present. Maybe there's glowing crystals. That makes sense. There would be that kind of thing, and the cave is lit in some way, and so maybe there's there's like luminescent crystals that glow around. So I have little crystals around. What else when I cast my eyes around? Skulls, bones, creatures that have been eaten and left here. There's no dirt for them to sink into, so they're going to sit on top of the rocks. So that's going to be there. Yeah, I mean, there you go, right? Like, conjure that whole scene in your head and just start imagining. Like, the way I always do it is, imagine I were going to write box text for my D&D group as a DM and wanted to set an interesting visual scene for them to be in. What all would be there, right? And you can go farther than that. Like, chains on the walls because somebody was once chained in this cave, or, you know, and on and on and on, right? Now, how to make stalagmites? I make them out of well, you can get some in one of the basing kits, like one of these type of basing kits. Yeah, it's actually, this one has some in it. But you can see how this basing kit has like mushrooms and stalagmites in it, as well as all this junk. So you can see if somebody's just selling these bits, because those are useful. You can also, Hearst Arts Molds has one. That's where I make most of mine. My crystals and stalagmites and stuff like that. I use resin, and I used Hearst Arts Molds. So check that out. I have a video on using Hearst Arts Molds and resin. So you can go check that hobby cheating out. Any suggestions on making green and red as complementary colors not become a Christmas tree? Yes, same thing I said before. One of them has to be highly desaturated. Christmas is both of those colors in their true form. Take one of them and very much desaturate it. Make it red and green black or something like that, right? If one of the colors is much weaker, it won't feel Christmassy. It's really that simple. Chaos Spawn. I do zenithal, then pallid flesh, dry brush, then 50-50 Nulnoy and medium before adding any color. For fleshy bits such as Dark Oath models or trolls, should I use strong tone instead of Nuln Oil? I would you'll see a video coming soon where I do basically what you just described. And I actually used a mix of Druchii Violet and Agrax thinned. And I liked that. Added a little bit more visual interest. A little more brown, black, purple mix. I had good results from that. Okay. Konstantinos. Hey, Vince, question about paints. How do we store them and how long can they stay in a box? Can they come back maybe with flow, whatnot? I mean, I store them on the nail polish racks you've probably seen in any number of videos that I've done. And how long have they sat there? I mean, some of them have sat there for like 7 or 8 years. They've been on my wall since I put up some of the initial racks. And they still work fine as long as they're sealed, and the area that you're in is relatively normal in temperature. Like my office is in a basement, as you can see from that window right there, and so the temperature down here stays very normative. Like it doesn't fluctuate wildly, which is one of the things that could cause some challenges. Can they be resuscitated? Yeah, sure. Sometimes you can add in more medium, not really flow improver. You might want a little bit of that, but it would be mostly medium that you'd be putting in, like, a Lamia medium or a thinner medium or an acrylic medium or, Liquitex medium. It doesn't freaking matter, just something like that. And you'd want to mix that up and agitate it around. But that's probably but there's going to come a point where they just can't. The key with storing your paints is, don't put them in direct sunlight and make sure they stay in an area that's relatively normal in temperature, and they'll last years and years and years and years, decades if they're properly sealed. As people who will often randomly share on Facebook that they found some old pot of X Citadel paint from the early 90s and it still works. Well, those are just sealed really well, right? And they just were in a relatively normal temperature, and pop it open and boom, still good to go. Soda Addict. I just ordered a bunch of Pro Acryls with some Creature Caster models yesterday. Very excited to try them. Held myself back from buying the entire set. Yeah, you'll enjoy them. They're nice. And, I just got some of the new bottles. So everybody knows. So Creature Caster's bottles previously were like this, the Pro Acryl paints. They switched to a bottle like this. One of the challenges I think people had is that this bottle is really hard. Like, it's a really, really strong, hard plastic. And they go out in a weird way where you turn this knob and then it creates the paint up top and so on and so forth. The new one still works like that. That is to say, the new one still has the twisty top, which I've actually come to really like. But the plastic is like softer. It's a really nicer plastic, and you get 2 more milliliters of paint. Same price, but the new ones are 22 milliliters compared to 20. So that's cool. Neat stuff. Pro Acryl delivers value. But yeah, I really like the new ones. I had to replace some ivories and bright ivories myself recently because I use those things all the time. Josh Kelly, any advice for speed paint on warm purple robes, colors for underpaint or specific paint for a glaze? Doing 180 gits. Sure. Yeah, if you want to be warm purple, my best advice would be a deep whole red up into like an ivory or a flesh tone or something like that would be good. And by the way, that's great colors for goblin skin too. Red is the complementary to green. It will naturally desaturate into brown shadows. The ivory top would, or a Caucasian style flesh tone, light flesh tone would make a great. It'll make a great yellowy green highlight. So it'll work well for both the green of the goblin skin and the purple for the robes. And that like deep whole red will give you a lustrous deep shadow purple, and the ivory will give you a nice bright purple. So that kind of a speed paint, that's what I'd do. You could, by the way, just do a standard zenithal and then do whole red from below and reshoot from ivory on top or something like that. Or you could completely switch your colors. Doesn't really matter. Brandon S. For my next project, I want to do a city's army themed around boarding pirates with a big model destroying a ship, but don't have any idea of what to put in. Any ideas? City's army themed around boarding pirates with a big model destroying a ship. Like as a diorama or as part of just a regular thing? A boarding pirates with a big model destroying a ship. I don't know, man. I mean, like Star Drakes are takeable 1 and 4, so you could have a big Star Drake crushing like something else. I don't know. There's a lot going on there, man. That feels more like a diorama than an individual model. To be completely honest, I'm not sure, but like think of how you can integrate like Caradron Overlords can go in Tempest Eye, so you could play with stuff there. Stormcast can be in all the cities, so you know you could have things like Star Drakes and stuff like that. So maybe that's the answer. It's the CMD. Hi Vince, I started value sketching and working with inks. How could I apply shadows in areas that are black but might look better in a different color? And how do I choose correct shadow colors? Yeah, so the answer is take your gray or your middle level of your value sketching up a little higher. Like I don't leave much actual black on the miniature other than like lines when I'm working with, you know, initial value sketching. The answer is though, like because they're just very hard to move that color. So if you turn more of it gray and then use deep shadows over it, you know, darker purples and stuff like that, then it's gonna look better and the color is gonna actually move. Now, how do you choose the correct shadow colors? I mean, do you have the next 3 hours for me to explain the complexities of shadow colors? Like, that's a huge question you just asked, man. But at the same time, it doesn't matter. Somehow those are both true. Let me see if I can unpack what I mean here. Shadows just need to be a dark color. One. Beyond that, it doesn't matter. Like, unless you're talking painting for Golden Demon here, or, you know, Capital Palette, or you want to go to Monte San Savino, if those are your goals, then we need to have a much deeper discussion. If you're painting an army, it doesn't matter. They just need to be dark. They just need to be shadows. Okay? Now, here's the simple rule of thumb. Let's go the next level down. The simple rule of thumb is warm highlights have cold shadows, and cold highlights have warm shadows. So, if you have like a glacier blue as a highlight, then it's whole red or crimson red or something like that, some deep that color. Yep, that's your shadow color. If you have warm ice yellow ivory as your highlight, then you have blue or blue black or something like that as your shadow color. So like a Payne's gray. What's the easy answer in the middle? Red plus blue make dark purple. Right? So purple can kind of act as this interesting universal shadow color on almost anything. It can shadow red, it can shadow green, it can shadow blue, it can shadow other purple. Basically, the only thing it doesn't really work great over is orange and yellow. So, and you know, they like when you go into orange, you can still work a little purple into your shadows. Like orange, like take something like a black leather, which is brown with some purple in it. That can be a great way to get shadows in orange. So you're still having this hint of that kind of color. But there you go. Hopefully that helps. Now, beyond that, the answer is just make sure there's some kind of color in there. So, there you go. Hopefully that helps. Andre, so could you please do an updated vid on shading true metallic metal? You did one on Skaven's back with, like, coppers. I would love to see this done on a model with more of a variety of angles and armor shapes like Stormcast. Yeah, absolutely. It's something I'm going to return to over and over again because it's something I'm constantly doing. In an upcoming video, you'll see it as part of a larger process. Like there's an upcoming video where I do focus in on it for 5 or 6 or 10 minutes of the video, so you will see that happening with some interesting angles. But yes, I'll do a whole video on it again. Absolutely. Galen, what do you think about the Grimdark or Blanchitsu style of painting? Have you tried it? Do you think it's good for beginners? I think it's fine. I don't like it. It's not for me. I think John Blanche is one of the most talented artists ever. Certainly in this hobby. He set the tone for a thing we love. I think he is really good at using those desaturated tones to tell interesting stories, especially in two-dimensional art. It's often that style is often just used as an excuse to not try and to just like paint super messy for no reason. John is very purposeful if you watch him apply it. Like if you go and watch the Voxcast interview with him where he actually paints in real time there with with Wade, you see how intentional he is about what he's doing. Like paint goes in different places outside of quote unquote lines, but he's very intentional about how he does his colors. It's not just like slapdash, which is how I think a lot of people interpret that to be, and it's not. There's an intentionality to it that's really important. But either way, it just doesn't suit me. My favorite colors are pink and teal, man. That's not Blanchitsu. Okay. Like I like bright colors. I like poppy things. I live a synthwave life, and that's not where that style lives. So it's just not for me. Do I think it's good for beginners? Honestly, probably not, because I think it instills in them lessons that aren't great. Here's what I mean by that. Blanchitsu is intentionally breaking the rules in a way that, like, it's fine to break rules in painting. Art is a bunch of guidelines. There are more guidelines, Miss Turner. But, like, they can be broken. Some can be bent. Others can be broken. But you have to understand what that means and how to break them properly. Like you know, it's like any other artistic pursuit. Like you can break the standard structures of writing a novel, but you have to be a good writer to do that and understand why the standard structures are there. And when you subvert them or deviate from them, it has to be purposeful. So I would say no in general. I don't think it's good. All right. Steph, sup Vince, any tips on what colors for a warm brown skin color? I find painting natural brown skin difficult since it always ends up looking like bark or mud. Sure. I have a video on painting dark skin, so I would go reference that, Steph. I still like that video very much. But yeah, I mean, the answer is skin tones, especially various shades of African and darker skin tones, can run a wide gamut of colors. And the answer is they need to have the same transition of highlights as any Caucasian skin tone or any other sort of ethnicity you would want to build in. Using Caucasian style flesh paints and the highlights of darker African skin tones actually works because that creates your highlight colors very naturalistically. Thinned oranges and orange glazes work because all skin has orange as its sort of base. Even very pale people who live in basements and are trolls like me. The deep purples work well to work in there. So that's what I would kind of recommend. You can go watch that video and see how I use all the colors I just mentioned over the course of it. But there you go. You need to still run the same gamut. There still needs to be red tones in there because there's still blood pumping in veins, and skin goes red. So that's kind of how I would recommend it. Stephen Powell, I'm new to airbrush and I was doing test models for my Zombicide Invader box set, and I found that my primer and ink were beating up even after I washed the second one. Did I overthin? Were beating up. Oh, okay, I got it. On the miniature, they were beating up. Maybe. Could be you overthinned. Could be you have too much pressure. Could be you're pulling back too far. If you're new to airbrushing, your airbrush is a dual trigger control. It's not just back, it's also down. And a lot of learning to use the airbrush is brush control. It's the same as working with a paintbrush. And so when you have very thin paint, you have to be very controlled. Your PSI might have been too high. That could also be a possibility. I generally run it at the same thing that I know a lot of people do, which is 18 psi or somewhere in the 1.8 bars range. That's kind of, I know people like Angel Giraldez do they run about that same place. Although he's a crazy person. I was just watching one of his videos earlier. He has a great channel, by the way, and he was using like a 0.15 needle. I can't even imagine how small that is. Like, that's insanity. That man is gifted with an airbrush, to be sure. But anyways, most of it's just brush control. It's just learning how to press the trigger. So try to depress the trigger less, pull back less, and see where that gets you. Maybe try a little slightly lower PSI. See if that helps. If it's still beating, then yeah, it's the thinness. Store her Tugin. That is a heck of a name. Hi Vince, just been digging through some of your videos on suggestions from a Facebook group after I made a meme. It's really helpful, and I just dropped by to say hi and thanks. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, thank you. I'm glad. I'm always happy when new people come to the channel and join me. I certainly hope you're all on the hobby journey with me, and I'm glad. Thank you. Okay. So let's see. Okay. I got to go into hurry up mode here because I have a lot of questions. Oh my gosh, so many questions. All right, I'm going to answer some of these quicker because we're getting up toward the hour, and I want to make sure I get all your questions answered. Effortol, hey Vince, I dug your 24-hour ogre video. What are some other good armies this would work with? That's a great question. Simple answer, anything that's somewhat uniform in its application, doesn't have an overemphasis of details. Stormcast, yep, A+. Flesh Eater Quartz, oh man, they would be great for it. Bone Splitter Orcs, that would be really good. Gloomspite Gits, especially if you're doing like trolls and squigs and stuff. Oh, that would be fantastic there, no issues. Trying to think of any. Oh, Nurgle in general, especially a more demon focused Nurgle would do really well with that because it's just a lot of gross flesh, so you can just be like going nuts with colors and washes and stuff. So yeah, that's a good list probably. There's probably some more, but that's a good one. Steve Dooley, I really enjoy painting, but I have never painted for the sole purpose of the joy of painting. Oh, listen to Bob Ross, The Joy of Painting. I would like to start my journey into competition painting. Any tips on where to start? Yes, start by entering a competition. Sit down, pick a piece you really love, something that's going to be good for competition, a relatively open figure that doesn't have a lot of like insanity, or when I say open, I mean a figure like this versus like this. And spend as much time as you humanly possibly can with it. Torture yourself. Okay? Because part of what being good at competition painting is doing is building up your endurance. When you want to run a marathon, you don't immediately go out and run 26.2 miles. You run a mile, and then you run 2, and then you run 2 again, then you run 3, then you run 5. You got to build up that endurance, right? This is the same thing. Paint until you are just out, then get feedback from people, then paint again. Until you cannot take it with that miniature. And then go to competition and lose with it. Right? Or whatever. And feel the emotional crush of that. Or, if you win, hey, super happy. But the point is that, like, paint for you. Because at the end of that, what's going to happen is, and talk to the judges. And understand where you need to do the next figure. Because at the end of that, the value is that you have a beautifully painted miniature that you put your heart into. That's worth more than any award, any acrylic trophy, anything like that. Because you will learn so much by doing that. From the process of it, from building your endurance, from getting the feedback from others, from getting the feedback for judges. It is the fastest way to like take a bunch of steps on your hobby journey. And it will be so valuable as an experience. Like, I cannot explain how valuable it was for me to just go to competitions and lose. I know that sounds harsh. And you know, like, some people show up and win their first time, and that's great. And good. But like, a big part of, I have lost at competitions a lot more than I've won. You know, I won a Golden Demon the first time I went to Golden Demon. Okay, now that was years into my competition painting. But I had 7 entries. 6 of them didn't win. 1 did. Right, so I lost 6 times. I won once. Now, I was very happy about that, but still. So my point is, it like the process, and then I took those 6 and I went and got feedback from all the heavy metal painters and judges and said, what should I have done better? And that was amazing, right? Because nowhere did I learn more than in that 20, 30 minutes where I'm sitting down with the judges. Because they tell you what they saw, and they have better eyes for it. So there you go. Yeah, that's my best advice. Hi Vince, have you tried Dark Star metallic paint range? Yeah, they're okay. I mean, they're not Vallejo metal color. They're too jelly, they're too gummy, they don't cover as well, they don't have the sheen. They're okay, but they're not as good. Jim Phillips, hi Vince, thanks for all your help. Do you thin Vallejo varnish when you airbrush it on? Yes, I do. I always use a few drops of thinner in everything that goes through the airbrush. Always. Always. Everything. Unless I'm just putting water through to, like, keep it clean. Jim Phillip, sorry, next one. Water. Hi, Vince. I've been looking into oil paints, and they seem to offer many advantages. Why would you say they are so seldomly used for miniature painting? Because they take a real long time to dry. That is an advantage and a disadvantage. We all move to acrylic paints because acrylic paints are simple, they're easy, they're non-toxic, they dry super fast, and that's generally what people want in their paint. Oil paints are more tricky to work with. Like, they take more, they have a more shallow learning curve, and they're just harder to kind of get your head around. They're more toxic, they're more expensive in general, they require white spirits to thin and work with. They have challenges, but they do offer a lot of advantages. Like, blending is no longer a thing. You don't, like, struggle to blend with oil paints. You can blend anything. Like, that's just not a thing because your paint's wet for a day. You can sit there and just push colors around and blend like it's going out of style. Blending is only a challenge in this hobby because we use acrylic paints that dry in seconds, right? So, there you go. So yeah, but I think they're fun. I use them quite often. It's a matter of, like, are you willing to put in the time to kind of learn how to do it? That's all there is. Grumdy, hi Vince, I'm having trouble painting glowing eyes in my Mortec art. They have recessed eyes with a raised pupil. What technique would best achieve that look? So go watch my glowing eyes video, and you'll see that the trick is you need a bright highlight on the pupil, dark all the way around in the socket, basically. And then a slight light, very light, lighter than that. Are you thinking light enough yet? Nope, twice as light as that. Glaze around the socket. Okay. Now, how would I achieve that? I would paint the inside of the eye relatively dark in a color that I wanted. Like, let's say I wanted green glowing eyes. Okay, I'd paint the socket a dark green. And then I would paint around the little pupil a black green. And then I would go in and touch the pupil with white, and then I would go in and touch the pupil and let that dry, and then I would go in and touch the pupil with a bright green. Then I would take that same green that I used initially, and I would thin it way out, and I would glaze it around the socket. That'll create that nice transition. Hopefully that helps. Philip, I can't say as I need to get on with a text mini. I just wanted to thank you, Vince, for all the amazing material you put out. Oh, well, thanks, man. That's great. Let's see. I work in school with kids around 12 to 13-year-old next week. I'm starting a workshop for them to come and try out paint miniatures. What could be a simple first lesson in painting? Oh, boy. For kids, yeah, I think probably just having them paint areas, just literally getting colors balanced and get their brush control. I think that's the most important thing to do first. Just like, if we want to start with the simplest method, just show them some paint and bring a couple washes with you and have them focus on applying paint to just an area and then wash it over and let them, they'll feel like it's amazing because the first time you learn how to use a wash, it really is just like mind blowing. And so, yeah, that's what I would do. Like, I would bring some relatively simple minis with some interesting texture like fur and stuff that's not hard that wash will really pop on, and I'd go that way. Can you mix the AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish with inks to kill the shine? Oh, absolutely. Yes, and I do all the time. It's great. I mean, it'll thin the ink. It'll be less impactful because you've subtracted the amount of pigment in the overall mix. But yes, it works. Let's see. Oh, I can't imagine how YouTube captions me if it's using the automatic captions, Bethany. That has to be hilarious. Daniel Baker. Hi, Vince. Love your work. Any tips for choosing color schemes? Look at the real world, at interesting things. That's the best way I can describe it. My journey with color schemes always starts with just Googling images. I Google art of a thing I want. Like when I did When I do various things, I just start by Googling art out there that I think is cool. And just looking at various paintings and things like that, and looking how they use color. Look at new art for stuff. If I want to do something cool, I'll look at like synthwave or punk art, or I'll look at flowers in nature and stuff like that. Like natural creatures are a great way to look. Go look at art of underwater plants and flowers and all sorts of stuff like that. The real world is the best example I can give you. Let's see. Robert says, what PSI do you most typically use in your airbrush? I answered that already, but it's 18 PSI or, in 1.8-ish bars, somewhere in that area. How does the varnish save point work? It's pretty simple. In between doing your various tasks, you just varnish the mini. I use a satin varnish in the middle. I think that's the best mix. And what'll happen then, you let that dry, and then you keep on painting. And what's great about that is if you get paint somewhere it's not supposed to be, you can just take a big old brush, wet it, and just rub the heck out of that area of the miniature, and you'll wipe the paint right away. And because the underlayer under that's varnished, you don't rub anything else off. And there you go. It's just that easy. It's great. So if you make a mistake with your brush, which we all do, you just grab an extra crappy brush I keep beside me, wet it, flood the area, wipe, and you can scrub kind of hard because you've got a protective varnish layer there. Marcello, Vince, how would you go about introducing color to the shadows and the high points on black armor? I'm struggling to figure out my base since it seems counterintuitive to Zenithal. So watch the black armor video I just put up today is the best answer to the question, and it will show you how I do just that. But the short answer is you use deep reds. Here's a simple one. You use deep reds in the low tones, and you use blues in the high tones. Cold highlight, warm shadow. That's it. It's that easy. But I do dig into that in a much deeper version in the video from today. Maroc, if you were going to paint something with two sources of light, how would you go about starting? Say one light from below and one light from like above. And how do you go about painting with a desaturated color? Yeah, sure. So multiple light sources. If it was like a single miniature, which I've done this for competition many times, yeah, you just kind of start. I'll generally sketch the sort of Zenithal or the Grisaille, whatever you want to say, from both sides, from both places the light's going to be. And it's a lot of careful work. Like, it takes a while because you need to tone everything specifically. So, like, what's cold, if there's like oftentimes you see it's done in cold light, warm light. If you go back and look at my Tomb King bust I did, he had this because he had cold light coming from back here, and then he had a warm light coming up from here. And it took a long time. It's just careful placement and using different, the same midtones, same color. Like, everything is this color, but it looks very different because one I'm using a cold highlight for, glacier blue or something, and one I'm using a warm highlight for, yellows and flesh tones and ice yellow or whatever, right? So yeah, I mean that's the best answer. How do you paint with a desaturated color? You desaturate it out. So that is to say, we all desaturate our colors all the time. When we're highlighting with a white or a bright color, that's just desaturating. But mix in the complementary, add white, add gray, add brown, add black. All of those desaturate in different ways. Michael, any preferences on color shift paints? Not really. Nope. There's lots of the various paints that perform that sort of color shift and color changing effect. I don't tend to like them much at all, is the short answer to your question. I just like they're not a thing that I particularly enjoy. So it's personal taste. Galen, why some of the Citadel's bone colors like Pallid Witch Flesh or Ushtabi bone are so hard to make them flow smoothly? I have problems with them even using medium. Because they have white in them, and white is a naturally chalky color, and it depends on the white pigment they're using. I mean, that's all it is. But yeah, get yourself some white ink and mix in other colors, or try the Pro Acryl off whites. They're smooth as butter, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of good ones in there. The Red Wizard, how do I convince my wife that the non-toxic acrylic paint we use is fine to use in the same house as our newborn? Just point her to anything that shows acrylic paint is non-toxic. It is. There's nothing harmful about it. I mean, it's just around. It's that show her like kids' finger paints for children that are made out of the exact same material as your stuff is would be my probably go-to. You know, that's like, that kind of stuff is literally the exact same product. So if kids are literally meant to get their hands into it and start going like this and wipe it all over themselves like kids are prone to do, it's probably safe. Okay. But I don't have children, so I don't know. My dogs don't seem to mind. They don't complain. Ruben, hello Vince. Chibi Big Head Minis advice, please. Yeah, it's a great question. I want to do more videos on chibis. The best answer, here's the shortest answer. Pop everything to 11. Chibi should be bright. They should be colorful. They should be loud. High, like, you take the contrast up, up, up. Chibis are contrast in action. You want contrast of hue, contrast of value. You want them to pop, pop, pop. Okay? But I'm going to do more chibi videos. I have a chibi coming up here sometime soon. It might be a couple months, I warn you. But I am going to do some more chibi videos because I want to get there's a couple chibis I've got I really want to get painted. Terry Core, good afternoon, Vince. I'm new to airbrushing. I'm struggling trying to properly thin down Vallejo primer to the right consistency. Any tips? I have their flow improver and thinner. I mix an 80. Here's the best I can give you. Make sure their primer is very, very well shaken. I use my little lab mixer paint shaky thingy. But even if you don't have that, that's fine. You can put a little agitator ball in there or something. As long as it's not ferrous metal, you'll be okay. And I use a little less than a 1-to-1 with my primer. And my thinner mix is 80-20 thinner flow improver. And that goes through just fine. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. Daniel, thanks so much for the answer on cave bases. Follow-up question. How would you mold the cave floor? Milliput. Just definitely milliput. Just some stones. Just make up some stones. Yeah, you can also, by the way, Hearst Arts Mold does have a cave floor mold as well. So, might want to think about that. But otherwise, just milliput. Yeah, just fashion out some quick, simple cave stone and add in the texture. That'll let you put in cracks and go nuts. So, and milliput's just cheaper than green stuff in mass. I wouldn't generally use green stuff for a thing like a base. Let's see. Boomin2. Okay. So I'm a pretty new painter. My question is, why do all my brushes get the fish hook? I clean them, dry them like I see on YouTube, and I use conditioner, but they all still get the fish hook. Probably because they're synthetic, and that's going to generally happen because they have long extra hairs that are just... Synthetic brushes will just do that because they're made of some... Like, it's the material they're made of. And after some amount of use... Like, synthetic brushes are meant to be cheap and throwaway. Your like sable brushes or stuff like that won't generally do that. My advice is go somewhere like Hobby Lobby and get yourself big packs of cheap synthetics, and then you can use those until they fish hook, and then you toss them. It's just what it is. Like, you can clean them, but the fish hook isn't a nature of paint stuck in the ferrule or anything. It's just, you know, it's what's going to happen. Now, here's a possibility. Chances are, if you're new, you're leaving paint on your brush for a long time. Like, ask yourself, how long are you sitting there with wet paint and working on an area? And if the answer is a while, where the paint is drying to any degree on the brush, that will expedite that. Even if you clean it, it doesn't matter. You've reshaped it by letting paint dry on there in some way. Because as the paint dries and the water evaporates, what happens? It goes like this, right? If you've ever watched, like, when the water evaporates, it causes the shrinkage, right? And that's causing this to come down. So what's happening is the paint is drying on the tip of your synthetic brush to some degree, and that's going to happen. Using a bigger brush is a good way to avoid that because it keeps more wet paint in the belly of the brush. You know, if this is your brush, you've got the tip, and then you have the belly, and then you have the ferrule down here. You want a lot of wet paint in here. That will prevent that from happening. Randy, I have a metal figure with a tab on the bottom that fits into a slot on the base. It would be easier to remove the tab or mount it and try to fill the gap. I always cut tabs off, and then just, like, I always cut tabs off the bottom of minis. I never keep the tabs on the bottom. I cut them off, file it down, make it completely flat. Job's good. Josh, wanting me to interview Marco. Yeah, I love, I love Marco. I watch all his stuff. He seems like a super positive guy. I love his attitude. I want to reach out to him and see if I can talk to him. He's a very, very fun dude. Trifos, any tips for masking off the slots in Blood Bowl bases? I want to add water effects, and I don't know if masking tape will hold up to that. Yeah, sure. You got any clam packs? Cut up a piece of clam pack, like just, the plastic of a clam pack, and then super glue it over the top. Ta-da. Go back and watch a very early video, like maybe Hobby Cheating 5, which was like how to make ice bases, and you'll see how I cut clam pack plastic to do that. But any super thin piece of plastic card like that, it's just that's free. Okay. Oh yes, yeah. Adam uses granola bar wrappers. Yeah, I saw that too. That is another fun one. But yeah, anything solid like that should work. Okay, let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Just going through the discussion. Good. Glad to see people answering each other's questions. That's awesome. Soul Grinder skin. I want to make pale skin with purple and brown as shades and highlights. How can I make this work? Do that. Do that thing. It sounds like you've got the plan to me. You don't need me to tell you. You've got all your colors. Glazes is probably the answer. Like pale skin. So let's say a pale gray would probably be your right answer. That's what's going to look best on that. Transition into some purple. Transition into a deeper brown. I would use a brown red. And you're rock and roll. Like if you watch any of the videos where I paint skin, you'll see how I go about it. Like if you want to do the actual technique of brush application, go back and watch like how I did Ruddy Dwarf skin, but just replace with your colors there. But yeah, I think that sounds like an awesome plan. Hey Vince, how would you get neon colors such as safety vests or things under blacklight but not OSL? I use fluorescent paints from War Colors and Scale 75 generally. You can also use the Vallejo ones. And that gives you like a hyper bright fluorescent color. I don't like whether or not they actually fluoresce is irrelevant, but it gives you that hyper color thing you're looking for. So that's what I do. You've talked a lot of varying colors by adding other pigments, i.e. green skin with red tones for depth. As a noob, mine's end up cloudy and dirty, or just how do you do that effectively? It's about thinning the color down and learning the brush control. Like it's just if you go back and watch the orc skin video that I did, how to paint orc skin. So this is maybe like 103, and you'll see how I just used red from below. The key is you use very little amounts of it. If I'm doing with a brush, like I did with an airbrush first, red underneath, and then I just did greens over the top. There, I didn't have to mix reds in at all. You can also watch my desaturating colors video. I think that one's in like the 60s. You'll see how I mix green into red. That one will really give you a good example because I mixed green into red when I was painting Little Red Riding Hood to do her shadows. Because she was in a forest scene. So I wanted everything to be in those naturalistic colors. The answer is small amounts, right? Like when I say desaturate it only takes a little bit of green to desaturate red. And if you're getting like a brown color, you're just over mixing them because that's where they come to in the middle, right? So you just want to mix less. Let's see. And let's see. Yep, there are water-based oil paints. Yep, those are good. I know it's crazy, but yeah, I haven't messed with them completely. All my oil paints, I have a bunch of oil paints, and they're all just traditional, oil paints, like oil paints. What satin varnish do you use for save points? Just Vallejo satin varnish. Let's see. Oh, Marcello, no problem, buddy. That's perfectly fine. On getting this notification before the Black Armor video. No, hey, I've got a detailed answer to your question that I published today just for you, buddy. Gandhi, hey Vince, how did you do the aged white banner on that ogre speed paint video? I wanted to do it on Stormcast robes. Stippling, nothing more to it. It's literally just taking washes. Like I took Seraphim Sepia and Agrax and Nuln and a relatively decent sized brush and just stippled it over and over again. Not washing it. I'm just dipping the wash, wicking off the excess, and then stippling, and then wiping it and getting the next one, and then stippling, and repeat that 20 times. That's all there is to it. It's a great way to make worn looking things. So there you go. Eric, hey Vince, how do you paint realistic looking tank tracks? Super, super rusty. What are you, when you paint them in gunmetal into a series of darker washes to imitate light rust? Oh, sure. So if you want like old, rusted, dirty, weathered tank tracks, depends on how dirty and rusted you want to be. But I mean, yeah. So start at the beginning. When you work with your metal color, put some brown ink in there. Let's start there. Let's just get this brown from the beginning. Right? If this is really old and weathered and oxidized steel, let's throw that ink in there right away. Let's get it brown. Then we can do some things like washes over metal when we're going for old, like very weathered metal. It's okay to wash it. I generally am against washing true metallic metals because you're just ruining the shine. But in this case, we want to ruin the shine, so thumbs up. And then you'd start using. I use a mix of like pigments and regular paints and inks, and just start getting the colors in there. The best thing you can do is lots of stippling and lots of randomness. It needs to be organic. So I'll usually just take a pretty big brush and just start working stuff around. Like literally just, it's like I think Psycho, like rain, but flip it around and that's your paintbrush. And that's really the best way to go, right? Because that creates this very naturally random organic pattern. And then you can come back at the end and you could have some scrapes that show just regular old gunmetal or steel or something. Like you can come back in and put some just little chips where the tank is driving along and it hit a rock and chipped off some of that rust and got back to real metal. Don't go to silver. Go to steel. But chips don't become bright silver. Yeah, okay. Hey, Trevarian, how you doing? Good to see you, my man. Been loving your videos lately, man. That if ever Trevarian's in the chat there, if you haven't watched his Purity Seal video that he put up, I would highly recommend it. It was such a nice explanation of how to get a good-looking Purity Seal. So great video, buddy. Everybody should go check that out. Let's see. Wishkurt. I'm probably saying that wrong. Hi, Vince. What would you use to dry brush green tones? For example, Cayman Green from Vallejo. I don't know Cayman Green. I don't think I have that color. Yeah. But at any rate, shouldn't matter. Painting some crocodiles with decently big scales. Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, a yellow-ish tone or an ivory-ish tone, and then I would just glaze back over them. The dry brush should never be your final step, because it's even when it's very soft. 1, use a makeup brush. 2, use less paint than you think. 3, use more strokes than you think. So like this is one of my dry brushes. It's a very soft like eye makeup brush. This is like, baby skin soft, right? And I get most of the paint off that, and then this is the amount of time it should take to cover and to make it start showing up. Okay, paint is showing now. Okay, we're good. Right? And if you apply it really soft like that, you won't get those streaks, but you still want to glaze after it. Using some kind of like ivory or a yellowish tone or something like that, like an ice yellow or something. If you then put a nice green glaze over it, it'll give you this very naturalistic highlight where you're catching the sort of warm light and the age of the scales and all that in one big thing. Sam Goose, can I use Rhinox hide for dark skin tones? What do I shade dark skin with? Yeah, sure. I mean, again, human beings are multifaceted and have so many interesting and fascinating colors in their skin. So yeah, it's probably a darker skin tone. So depending on how deep you're trying to get, I would use it more as using the example of like 1 is your highlight and 5 is your shadow, just to keep it completely simple. It would be more my 4 or 5. What would I shade it with? A deeper purple, basically. Like it's pretty dark. It would be basically your lowest tone. Okay. But yeah, you could absolutely use that. And then again, transition up into some lighter browns, mix in a little Caucasian flesh tone, mix in a little desaturated orange, desaturated deep reds. So there's colors like African Shadow, for example, from scale 75, which would be a great mid-tone to transition off of a Rhinox hide. So just that kind of stuff. Apollo, thanks for all the content. I'm setting my first airbrush right now. Any training tips? Run water through it first. Make sure, first of all, awesome. Well done. Congratulations. Welcome to a beautiful world of saving time and making the most of your life. My answer would be, run water through it first. Make sure everything's working. Like you need to make sure that nothing's backflowing. There's no bubbles, that you understand. Run water through it. Start there. Make sure that everything flows smoothly. Once that's done, make sure you understand how to disassemble it and stuff like that. Like take off the back, take off the chuck nut, get the needle out, take off the front, right? And then 2, you don't need to start on a piece of paper or anything. You can start on whatever, but don't start with primer because primer's real thick. So just like you can start on a piece of paper or some miniature that's already been primed before or something, and just kind of thin some regular paint and get comfortable with it. Okay, just so you understand like what's actually spraying out there, and go 1-to-1 with your thinner to your paint to begin with, at least, depending on what kind of paint you're using. Make sure you check your consistency, spray very little, and watch my how to clean your airbrush fast video. Do that often, and you should have a nice experience. So there you go. And then eventually, the reason I just say don't start with primers, because primer is just thicker and naturally a little more challenging. Once you feel you understand how you're thinning and how to blow paint through and how to get it clean with normal stuff, then you can go ahead and you're off to the races. I'd love to interview Cujo sometime. Yeah, Cujo's a great dude. And also, it would my wife would be very happy because she loves like Scottish accents. So there you go. I want to interview everybody eventually, all sorts of artists. How would you achieve the effect of a translucent purple cloak? It depends what's underneath it. Yeah, like you need to make the parts that are folds be purple and the parts that are not folds, like that are flat against something, be the color underneath it, is the short answer to the question. So go look at destroyerminis.com, which is Marika Reimer. Go look at Jen Haley's work. Go look back at the Queen of the Deep I did last year. You'll see a lot of this in play. Look at my sheer cloth video, how to paint sheer translucent cloth. Hobby cheating maybe in like the 130s, 120s, somewhere in that range. I don't remember the exact number. Because you need to show the light coming through it. It's a very, very difficult effect if the cloak is hanging out in the air. If it's against skin or something like that, it becomes much easier because then you can just kind of you can create the illusion that color's showing. If you're just showing light, it's a lot tougher sell. Like it's doable, but it's real hard. Matt O'Brien, hey Vince, do you have any tips for gauging the level of contrast when wet blending metallic paints? The appearance varies so much with the angle of observation that I end up feeling cross-eyed midway. You know, you're absolutely right. It's tough. My answer is yes, just turn and rotate. Get it to somewhere you think is relatively okay, then let it dry. And once it's dry, you're going to see any inconsistencies, and then you can, like with Vallejo metal colors and inks, you can glaze down. You can actually work metal colors as a glaze, which is one of the reasons they're amazing. And you can just then just smooth that out. So get it good enough is my answer, and then just fix later. Matt O'Brien, hey Vince, do you have any tips for gauging? Oh, that's what you just said. Sorry, Matt. Randy. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, cool. Already was answering somebody else's question. So we're gonna wrap up here. And so if there's any final questions, put them in the chat. We went a little longer. This was like an hour and a half, but whatever. Sorry, Adam, if I ran over your time there of his Patreon stream. I apologize. But hey, Trevarian, buddy, I'll sit down with you anytime. It's always good to hang out and talk painting, my man. Also, dude, your new studio looks great. Trevarian just moved into a new place, so congratulations. And his new studio is looking really cool. Setting up your paint space is something I can't recommend to everybody enough, just as a slight instructive freebie lesson. Get yourself a dedicated paint space to paint. Even if you don't have a lot of room, even if it's like literally a child's desk that's like 3 foot by 3 foot, just have a space. Have something that's already there, that's already set up, that's already ready to go, where you've got some paint, some brushes, some things at hand. It will just simply lower the barrier of entry to you sitting down and painting, and it will become a happy place for you, right? So even if it's very simple, a chair and a small desk, it's really, you can go bigger. A lot of people build their spaces and make it, something in a truly incredible, and that's wonderful when you can build yourself a great, gorgeous hobby space like that. But even something small, just having a space that becomes for this purpose means you will do it more. Okay. Jammy, you're welcome for the Black Armor video. How would you get over the fear of stripping paint off when cleaning oil washes up? I tore my nice highlights and now I'm wary. Softer touches. Makeup sponges is a good way to go. Grab yourself some makeup sponges. That's a good one. You can order big packs of like 100, 200 makeup sponges for $5 or $6 on Amazon. Those are like super soft because they're meant for people's faces. And those soak up paint really well without much risk of taking paint, because in fact I happen to have one right here. This is what I'm talking about. There are these little paint wedges, and you can just literally, like, you know, you got your oil paint, you can just go like boop, 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 boop. You just boop it, and booping doesn't remove paint. And that's how I often clean stuff up. So that's my best advice. Just boop away, and you should be good to go. Let's see. Awesome Exile, I'm glad to hear that. Yes, I will be at Warhammer Fest this year as soon as they announce it. Have they even said the date of Warhammer Fest yet? They need to get that announced. I certainly plan on being there, and assuming all things line up, I'll be teaching the week beforehand in London. So if you're going to be over there, I would love to have you to class. I don't have the details yet since we don't know the dates, at least as far as I know. If they did announce the dates and I missed it, please tell me, because I would love to know that so I can get those classes set up and going. But yeah, I'll be over there teaching in London the weekend before Warhammer Fest, whenever that is. And that's going to be a great time. I did that last year. It was super fun. We're going to do another class on doing some big monsters, and we're also going to do a display painting class for your character models. Like think a Space Marine Primaris Captain or something. And I think that's going to be super fun because we're really we're gonna get into it. So there you go. All right. Yeah, I hear you, Trurin. Yeah, setting up the space takes time. And yes, Mikey R says, don't let your painting desk get covered in a mess. Completely agree. Not only set up the space, keep it clean and organized. Organization is the key to paint. All of my paints go away after every project. Every time I'm done painting minis, they all go back into their respective space. I have a small nail polish rack right here to my side that holds my current paints I'm utilizing, and they all sit in this rack in an organized fashion. When they're done, they go back up on the wall. I do a cleanup step after every project where everything goes away. The wet palette paper changes, the water changes, everything gets cleaned and wiped down, and then we reset. And it's a cathartic Zen moment of the project is finished. We now wipe it from our life and we begin anew. I recommend that. So there you go. Been painting a bust and having trouble with glazes on the face, for example, adding red to the nose or cold weather usually ends up staining or leaving a tide mark. Any tips? Thin with a medium. If it's tide marking, the pigment is breaking up, so the paint you're using can't handle being thinned that much with a solvent that is water. Use medium instead. Make sure you wick off all the excess. And yeah, and maybe some flow improver, a tiny touch of it just to make it go there. Let's see. Zectaria, I never seem to get better at speed. I understand that you can't have both speed and quality. You can over time. You will see them come together. But like in the end, if you want really high quality, you can't have super speed. Like good quality always takes time. But you will watch them come together, right, over time. But sure. But sometimes it seems that pro painters have both. Any secret sauce to gain speed without losing quality? Practice. Focused practice on that thing. The key to anything in miniature painting is not practice, it's deliberate practice. So you practice your speed muscle. You focus on techniques like wet blending and shortcut techniques like that. You improve your brush control so you're able to hit the spot you want, achieve the thing you want in the minimal amount of time, right? When you're not correcting, you're moving faster. So techniques like wet blending and feathering and void brush blending and stuff like that are all the technique side of it. Brush control is just the time side of it. And then ultimately just understanding what you're doing and making sure you're not correcting is the skill side of it. And you put all those three things together over time with deliberate practice. Like say, I'm going to give myself 2 hours and I'm going to take this to the highest level possible. Go. Right? And force yourself into that and then do it again and do it again. Right? And you'll eventually get those tricks down. So there you go. All right. How do you organize your paints? By colors, by types, by brands? By purpose is the first. I'm fascinated by hierarchical orders. By purpose. In other words, pigments set apart from paints. Inks set apart from paints. Yeah? Okay. Purpose or type, high typology. Brand, color. Yeah, in that order. So there you go. So I tend to do the rainbow if possible, because I like that. It makes me happy. So there you go. That's set if there's set also in there. All right. So that's it. That brings us to the end, folks. Got to wrap it up. But I hope everybody enjoyed this. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, hey, hit that like button down there. It really helps more people know about this. I want to make sure I'm helping as many people as possible. I do this once a month. The more you like it, the more you comment, the more you share this kind of stuff. That does really help people find this, because that's what YouTube does. YouTube relies on that kind of stuff. So, so give it a like. Hit that little like button over there. That really does help. If you're new, subscribe. I can't imagine that anybody's here who isn't already, but if you aren't, hey, do that too. Like I said, we do this once a month, as well as all the normal hobby cheating and things like that. Thank you to everybody who came today and sat down. This was amazing questions. Everybody was wonderful. I do hope this really helped. I'll have the little palette cam back next time. I apologize. My camera just wouldn't work today, and my software was going wonky, and I didn't want to delay the stream, so I just did it this way. But I will have it back next time. But as always, I thank you very, very much for watching this. I hope everybody has a great day. I hope you're all painting some stuff on the weekend, and